do you think we have the gifts of the Spirit? Do we operate in the gifts of the Spirit? What is the purpose of spiritual gifts, if not to enable us to do the work that brings the glory to God Almighty?
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight for There Is a Word, where we believe that there is a word for every circumstance and situation in our lives. Words of joy, words of hope, words of faith, and just words to encourage one another. The word is something that where we can plant a seed and hope to nurture one another in love with it. I am so excited tonight to be joined by State Representative Paula Hicks Hudson, who's joining a little late, Jerry Sutton, and Dr. Peggy Barry. We are going to be talking about redistricting today. We're going to be talking about the implications it has on the Black vote, voting securities, the importance of the Black vote, and the woman's vote. I'm going to introduce our speakers, and I'll give them a minute to let you know a little bit about them. So our first speaker I would like to introduce is Representative Paula Hicks Hudson. Welcome, Representative.
Good afternoon, good evening. I'm walking through my house, so please forgive me as I get situated. It's been a crazy day, but thank you for inviting me, and we will have great opportunities to talk about redistricting, voting, and things like that. So thank you for the invitation.
Thank you for accepting it. It is always an honor to have you be a voice for our community and a part of the show. Our next guest this evening is Dr. Peggy Barry.
Hi, good evening. I am so happy to be here. And I am here in essence for the League of Women Voters of the Greater Dayton area, because voting is a right, and we believe in getting people registered and getting them educated to get the vote out. Again, Bishop Marcia, thank you for inviting us to this program.
Thank you for attending, Peggy. Thank you so much. Last but not least, I'd like to welcome to the stage Jerry Sutton.
Good evening. I'm Jerry Sutton. I'm a member of the League of Women Voters, but I'm also affiliated with Fair Districts, Ohio. And in that capacity, I've given presentations to a number of organizations around the state, primarily in the Southeast, most of the time by Zoom on redistricting. And that education process started in April, May, and is continuing. We had a hard time getting any traction with the state legislature for some time until just recently, and suddenly they said, "Whoa, I guess we should have been working this." So we'll see what's happening, and we can talk about that later and what the process is going forward.
Well, thank you. And again, let me say welcome to each one of our guests this evening. It is such an honor and a privilege to have you be a part of this rich discussion. I mean, as I said earlier, we're going to be talking about voting. Just to do a little recap of our last show, we talked about voting, how the Black church could be engaged with voting, how the church can be an instrument of change. And we also talked about House Bill 294, where State Representative Hicks Hudson really shared some information about HB 294, some of the implications behind it, and what it means moving forward for the state of Ohio. She also touched a little bit on redistricting, and so we felt like rather than leaving things incomplete, that we needed to continue to elongate that conversation. So I'm going to start with Jerry, because Jerry had mentioned that he has been doing some education with on redistricting. And he's been doing this in partnership with the League of Women Voters. And so, Jerry, can you explain to us, tell the listeners, what's some of the education that you've been doing around redistricting, and how has it helped to gain the awareness from the community? Because I know that, the community's participation is important. And then from there, I really want to go in a little deeper with you, Representative Hicks Hudson, around redistricting as well. So, Jerry, if you could really just tell us about your effort, how have you gotten people engaged? Give us an overview of what you're doing, and what this initiative is looking like, and how is the community really engaging? Because I know this is a very difficult process and something that people, the communities all over the world, have really been fighting against, this redistricting and or gerrymandering.
Well, redistricting does not necessarily have a default position into gerrymandering. It's the people that administer the process that gives you the result that appears gerrymandered. First of all, kind of a top view, every bicentennial, every 10 years, by the Constitution of the United States, we are required to reapportion. Our federal legislatures, our congressional legislation, representatives are right now specified by statute of 435. But population shifts in the United States, as it did this last year. Right today, we have 16 U.S. representatives in the Congress. Next year, we'll have 15 due to the reapportionment process, because while Ohio grew about 2.4% between the 2010 and the 2020 census, places like Texas, Florida, the Southwest grew faster. Therefore, our representative slot chair moved to Texas. They picked up 2 representatives. So once a reapportionment's done, then it falls to the state through redistricting to assure that the districts are properly apportioned within the state according to populations. Populations need to be approximately equivalent. So we've got 2 kinds of redistricting going on, 2 flavors. One, redistricting the U.S. congressional seats and who they represent. And 2, redistricting state house members. We have Representative Hudson represents a district, but there are 33 state senators and 99 House seats yet in the state of Ohio. So each of those has to be allocated so that it has a pretty consistent number of individuals in the state. To get to that number, you don't have to work real hard if you're in Cleveland to throw a net around the right number of people. So you have a number of state representatives within Cuyahoga County. But if you go out to, other counties, let's take Fairfield or Perry or Morgan, you'd have to pack a canteen and walk a long way to throw a net on the right required number of people. And that shifts every year, the population shifts. So I can talk today, and if I don't clarify which process I'm talking about, I'll try to do it. Either the congressional system or the state house redistricting, slightly different process, slightly different schedule, but they're all both extremely important. The key thing they must be done to support the primary next year and the inherent process for the primary so that prospective representatives or senators know what district they represent, which district they're living in, who they gets to sign their petition, and where they go to vote and campaign. So I'll talk about that schedule as we get down the road.
Thank you so much for sharing, Mr. Sutton. So, Representative Hicks Hudson, first of all, I'd like for you to, take some time to expound upon what Mr. Sutton said. But then I'd like to ask you as well, how does, redistricting impact the partisan political lives?
Well, let me just back up and say that, just to kind of bring us to where we are today, the Ohio Redistricting Commission was finally impaneled about 3 weeks ago, if and I might be generous with that, and it's made up of the 4 constitutional offices of governor, secretary of state, auditor, and it also has the Senate president, the Speaker of the House, and then there are 2 minority, and those are the majority, 2 minority members, which is for us in the House, it is our minority leader, and in the Senate, it is Senator Vernon Sykes, who has been working on redistricting for some time. The whole question about redistricting is that it's very similar if we look at it from the biblical context of getting a census that people ever, in Jesus' time, they went and returned to the home of their origin so they could be counted. So based upon the census, the various legislative districts, whether they're state or congressional, are based upon a population number. And so here, it was at the House level, it was determined that number should be approximately 119,000 people. And as Mr. Sutton said, casting a wide net. It's still difficult in Cuyahoga County, even though you just talk about sheer numbers, because the 2 constitutional amendments that really changed the way that redistricting is to occur is really trying to move it out of the partisan way that it had been developed into a more transparent way, and that citizens would be able to have an opportunity to comment on the maps prior to there being any vote by the commission. We just missed a deadline yesterday where the commission was to have had the maps for the House and the Senate, and the Ohio House, Ohio Senate. Missed that deadline. Senator Sykes, he proposed a map that was, I've been told it was a prototype, so to speak, to show that there could be a map that meets the requirements of those constitutional amendments, which means it has to be contiguous, trying to keep it within certain boundaries, like within a county, within a city, township, etc. It needs to, again, keep that number of around 119 for the House. I forget the number for the Senate. It's designed so that it's compact, but those rules apply. And then also that whatever map is created, there has to be a bipartisan acceptance of that map. If we don't get, so we blew the first deadline, which was yesterday. The next deadline is the 15th of September. Hopefully between now and then, the commission will have 3 opportunities for people to see proposed maps. And when we say by that proposed map, the 10 hearings that were held this last couple of weeks, everyone that I listened to said, we want to be able to have fair representation, fair maps. We want to be able to see them. Please have the 3 hearings so that we can look at them, give feedback, because this truly, in my opinion, is where democracy is so important, that people are able to participate. And so that's kind of where we are right now in terms of the movement of this redistricting. You mentioned about partisanship. Um, the partisanship is that we have to understand that when you look at, like especially the presidential elections, our state is not red, it's not blue, it's more purple. One, two election cycles, 3 election cycles, Barack Obama was voted in as president. The last presidential election cycle, well, the previous one, President Trump was elected, and now this last year we have President Biden. So we can't really say at that level that we are red or we are or blue. We're purple, because Ohioans, I think, are very practical, and they're looking for a representative that meets meets the things and the wishes that they want. So what redistricting is now is that trying to meet the wishes that the citizens have put forward, and it's going to be difficult because we're starting off with gerrymandered districts that were terribly gerrymandered, and how do we reach an equal, not necessarily equal, but because I think there's been some discussion that especially in the House, it should be maybe 54, 55 seats that would be Republican, and I can't add 45, 44 that would be Democrat, and that would be and that's reflective of the last presidential election or last couple of elections. What does that mean? What that means is that we would have better representation in terms of government at the state house. Better representation means that we will not necessarily have some of the extreme types of legislation being presented, because the elected official would really, I think, have to listen to their constituents, to the voters, and make sure that we're doing what we're supposed to do, which is to represent the people and not special interests, and especially not interests that are that are contrary to what folks want in Ohio. Not what's happening. There's a lot of discussion about politics is on the East Coast, the West Coast, and that there's nothing going on in the Midwest. Well, what we're seeing is a lot of those national issues, hot button issues, that many Ohioans are more concerned with, about growing their families in safe environments, making decent living wages, and those other things that people want to do, basic needs, and not necessarily all these other things that are, as I said, pushed by special interests. And so what will happen, what I think and hope, will not necessarily be partisan politics as usual, but people's politics, the politics of the people, ensuring that what we are charged to do is to represent them to the best that we can in their best interest. And that's what I'm hoping will come out of the redistricting. And if it doesn't work out, and if we're not able to have the maps, then unfortunately, and also I'm sorry, one last thing is that we really want to have 10-year maps, similar to the reason that Mr. Sutton said as relates to having some the election set, so that people will know, who could potentially be a representative, who can run. And so boards of elections will have enough time to do what they need to do so that they can get geared up for these elections that are going to be coming next year. But under the rules, if the commission does not have a map that meets those requirements, then it will be a 4-year map, and the 4-year map will be just terrible, I think, for us here in the state of Ohio. And I don't know if I answered your question, but I think that this is the status and the state of where redistricting is right this moment.
Thank you. Was your finger up, Jerry, because you'd like to say something? You'd like to add on to that? You're on mute if that's the case.
Yeah. I'd like to follow up. I think the horse is out of the barn on a 10-year map for the Ohio State House. The commission would have had to complete their work and have passed the map by the 1st of September, and it would have had to pass where 4 of the 7 members adopted it, and of those 4, 2 of them had to be the minority members. They didn't have the maps. They didn't pass it. The 1st of September is passed. The next deadline is the 15th. And that is where just a simple majority of the redistricting commission, these 7 designated individuals, and that majority could easily be Republican. And that will be a 4-year map, not a 10-year map, unless possibly they would have an argument for the Ohio Supreme Court if it was unanimous. Chances of that I wouldn't put money on, but I think we're in a 4-year cycle, unfortunately. How we got here? Everybody will point their finger at the census because the census was late. Well, a lot of the pro forma maps and the tough discussions could have been happening for the last 6 months. We knew this was happening. We knew that the data was going to be late. My engineering background would say you take the best available data. And I can bet that Representative Hicks knows within 5%, plus or minus 5%, the number of people in her district today. And every representative does. You could gather that data and do parametrics. Couple percent higher, couple percent lower. What does it look like? Have the tough discussions. When you got the data, then you put it in the system, turn the crank and look at the map. But you're down the road on this. Right now, we're starting with a clean sheet of paper. The 2 parties have been in their corner, coming in, picking their sides. The coming together is going to be wonderful. I had the privilege last week of testifying before Representative Sykes. Of the 7-member commission, there were 2 members there. The rest had designees. But this was an information gathering testimony. They went around the state, had 10 of them, but none of them count as the constitutionally required public hearings where they present maps and they're talking about maps. They were gathering information. They weren't providing information to the people. So anyway, we've got a long way to go and 2 weeks to do it in.
Well, Mr. Sutton, thank you for sharing that. Might I add a couple things to what you said? Number one, we're not here to attack State Representative Hicks Hudson. But I'm just saying. So I will say that I thank you for building upon what she said and then reiterating some of the other things that she said to reinforce, certain points which I think was worth reinforcing. And I'd have to say that if there is a representative, and this is no ping pong, is that Representative Hicks Hudson has been one who has been very viable and vocal in the community and has done a lot of teaching. And so again, I just don't want it to feel like that we're in that place. But one of the questions that I have, before I go, I see where Dr. Barry, what she would like to add to this. So Dr. Barry, please.
Yeah, I have to tell you a story first, okay? I worked for an occupational, for a trucking and air freight. Let me state that it was more trucking, because you think air freight means they're going to be a little more less male oriented. But Jerry, my husband is an engineer also, And he is really into the budget items. And even if he doesn't mean it, sometimes he comes across so strict. And Jerry, I have to redistricting is so important to so many people. Now, the League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization where we address the issues, and sometimes those issues aren't really the best. Like we are really concerned about voter suppression throughout the United States, but again, sometimes what appears to be adversarial is really just a way of trying to put across the frustration that occurs because all we have to do is plug those numbers in and get it done. And so it just reminded me of the arguments I have with my husband on budget sometimes. The numbers never seem to match up for us, but that was my 2 cents. I'll let you go back to what you were going to say, Bishop.
No, thank you. So again, thank you for sharing that because you brought something that's critical that we can just, build upon. One of the things you talked about was voter suppression, and we started this question or this conversation 2 weeks ago on our last episode. And I think that's one of the things that we lost the representative. One of the things that is concerning because of the fact that when we look at redistricting, we're looking at the voice or the vote of people. And we're already in a place, in a position where people are feeling like the vote is unsafe. It's, there's so many conspiracy theories and ideologies going on that is really precipitating and perpetuating fear. And so when you think about redistricting and what it does in so many different ways, how do we ensure that people, or how do we help people to know that their vote matters, especially when the redistricting occurs? It's pretty much like these lines that divide people off. So you I'll call it the have and the have not line, or who comes out to vote the most versus who doesn't come out to vote. It's like, for lack of a better way of putting it, you hear people saying that, they want to ensure that they get the vote that they want. And so when I think about redistricting and how it has impacted our communities, for so long, and voter suppression, how do we help people, Peggy? And you work with the League of Women Voters. How do we help people to, number one, feel secure about their vote, and number two, to ensure that their vote, I guess it's like people have been scrubbed off of the rolls, so to even ensure they have the ability or access to vote.
Okay, I had sent forward a list of links that you can find on your League of Women Voters website on checking if you're registered to vote. If not, where you need to register to vote. Thank you. It gives you all of the facts on there that will help you register to vote. The other thing that the League does, at least here in Dayton, we put out a guide, a voter's guide, every fall that will address the issues going on. As I said, the League is very nonpartisan. We do not support candidates or parties. We look at the issues, but we will allow any candidate who wants to fill out our form to put them into the voter's guide. And that at least will help you address the issues. Now the thing that I'm concerned about more than anything else is getting people registered to vote. So September 28th will be a voter registration day throughout Montgomery and Greene County. And the League of Women Voters of Greater Dayton area will be at various locations. And we'll probably announce those locations soon. But we will be manning those tables to get people registered, and or checking if they're registered, if they need to re-register, and where their precinct is. I hope that answers the question, Bishop.
Yes. Representative, you're on mute.
Unmute my, thank you. Sorry about that. I pushed the wrong button. One of the things that as a piggyback to what Dr. has said is that the Secretary of State just announced that they're going to be looking at purging voters that have been inactive. And that process goes on and on and on. But I think it dovetails and it ties back into this disconnect between elected officials and voters. We heard over and over during the 10 meetings of the redistricting committee from folks saying that they reached out to their elected officials, did not receive a return phone call or an acknowledgement or anything like that. And it was because they felt that they did not need to respond to these particular voters on issues because unfortunately many elected officials win their primary, which is a shoo-in that they will win the general election. So if I choose not to declare a party, then I can't vote. I don't get a chance to pick, from the entire range of the candidates. I can only vote at the general. And that means that person can say, well, I didn't need your vote, so I don't have to listen to you. That goes, I think, a long way to people saying, why waste my time or my effort to vote? And I think we have to do major civics lessons to voters to explain to them that you don't just vote at the presidential, you vote at every election because the city council races are important. In Lucas County, there is a group called the Movement, and I have their band on, and they are a grassroots organization that goes out. They recruit poll workers as well as they recruit others to help get folks registered to vote and then get them to the polls. They educate them on who's running, what the different positions are. And one of the best things that I like that they do, they go every place. They're in barbershops, beauty shops, laundromats. They're in traditional places, the churches. We do a major voter registration and education drive here because I think that those two things are very important. And then we have to show voters why their votes do count. And I'll just use an example that the movement uses. They talk about judges. We know about the drop off in judges, but one of the ideas is to say, if you don't like how a judge sentenced a relative or treated someone in court, you have the power to vote that person in or out or keep them in their office. And that has been a very powerful tool to make the issue of voting personal to the voter. And that's one of the things that, with national news and all of this partisan or I won't call it, partisan news or misinformation, people are not recognizing how important it is to vote every single election. And I just want to go back and just say this, that I was not offended by what Mr. Sutton was saying. I personally have in my realistic view that we will end up with 4-year maps. My hope is, of course, I have a daughter named Hope, so I always have hope that we'll have the 10-year maps. But I also believe that we're going to end up in litigation, which will be a shame because we knew last year that this day was coming. We knew that the census was going to be skewed. We knew that there was going to be underreporting because of the pandemic and different things like that. And so we're dealing with folks who, I'll just be honest, who either don't think it is as vital as we all do to our democracy, but it's also a thing, and this is not partisan, this is about power. And power, as we know, concedes nothing. And so if you're in a power position, you want to keep that position. And so you're going to do what you can to make that happen. But the people twice have said the power belongs to us. And because the power belongs to us, I believe that we're going to we may end up with 4 maps, but they're not going to be the 4 maps that might have been intended, because I'm hoping that everyone, that folks on this particular broadcast and others, will be looking with eagle eyes and ready to raise those questions and ask, where's our three hearings to look at the maps? Where are the maps? Where are the maps? We should be able to see them, so we're able to respond to them and hold all of us accountable for this. I've written letters to folks. I introduced a bill, late May, trying to get this thing moving, and it languished in the House. It was assigned to committee, never to have a hearing. Now the commission is working, but they met yesterday with no agenda. So I don't disagree with Mr. Sutton about that, but I'm hopeful. We always must have hope.
Thank you for that. Couple questions. One, Jerry, Representative mentioned about, the people. And so I know that your work is really gathering the people, mobilizing, engaging, and educating people to be a part of, one, educating them on redistricting, but also to engage. So I'd like to know, number one, what are some of the ways? So I've heard about, that people want to have a say on the maps. Do you do training, with regards to how people should, speak about this, when they're looking at the maps, what are they really looking at? There's a question here that's asking, where are the maps? But what does that education entail? Number one. And then number two, understanding that a lot of times it feels like information, especially pertinent information, gets bottlenecked. So what are some of the ways, what are some of the ways that we can get this information out more broadly in the work, that you're doing with the people? And I also know that's something that the representative can also speak to with regards to getting people out more broadly. But, just looking at that, a lot of people, some of this is just unfamiliar language and people don't have an understanding. So if you could just speak to what are some of the tools that you can provide, and what are some of the ways that people can get engaged, and then how do we keep them engaged in educating and preparing them, for the time to be able to comment on the maps?
Well, Fair District, the organization Fair District, is a combination of the League of Women Voters, Common Cause Ohio, and a number of other entities that are interested in educating the voting populace and getting the citizens engaged in the political process, because it is an imperative that we do if we want a democratic society. If we want an autocratic society, we can just sit back and relax and it'll happen to you. So a couple of words I'll try to cover, catch up. Voter suppression. If you want a very good, emotionally jarring video, watch Rigged, Rigged. It is hair-raising and shows nationwide what is done to suppress the vote. That used to be on Amazon Prime. If you have that, it's an excellent movie. As far as redistricting, if you have the time and inclination, I would recommend, for a good tutorial on the process and the criteria, go to www.lsc. That's Legislative Service Committee. So it's lsc.ohio.gov, and you can get a redistricting in Ohio. It explains it in very good detail, process, timeline, whatever. And that would be a good self-study. So how do we do it? I was in the speaking bureau mainly education, what is redistricting and how to get involved in the process. There's another group of people that did the mapping when they were getting focus groups, essentially, to get together to do a map. They're trying to define what is your community. What is the center of your community? School, library, churches, what are your areas of common interest? Fans of the ball team, whatever. And people, sit down and try to articulate that and draw little Venn diagrams on common interest to get together and focus on, okay, why are we the hole in the donut here? Our district has been cut up. And I'll give you an example from back in 2011. We had a couple of representatives in the state house from the Dayton area. If you're not familiar with Dayton, it's kind of a bifurcated community. The West is primarily Afro-American. The East is kind of a hodgepodge. But when they drew the map, and Tom Roberts and Strayhorn both represented there. When the map was drawn in 2011, they carved up West Dayton into about 3 different districts and peanut buttered them on to rural districts. And son of a gun, the former Montgomery County Sheriff is now the representative. And Mr. Strayhorn and Mr. Roberts, great citizens, are in the community versus holding down a seat in the state house and having a better voice in the state house. So that's the consequences. Like I say, the process is going on. The maps have to be done. Somebody mentioned it'll unfortunately go to the court, except, with the constitutions, it doesn't go to the Supreme Court of the United States. It goes to the Ohio Supreme Court. They have original and exclusive jurisdiction on the redistricting stuff. That means you don't go to the county court, you don't go to the appeals court, you go direct to the Supreme Court. They're not going to draw the maps for you. They're going to say, nope, doesn't meet the criteria, send it back to the paperwork. Trouble is, that all has to be done in the timeline. And we focused on the 2 dates thus far for the State House, which is the 1st of September, which we missed. And that was the opportunity for a 10-year map. And then for a 4-year map, it is the middle of September, September 15th. Then we get into the cycle of the congressional maps, of which we'll have 15. And that, the first cut is in the House of Representatives. Has that, and they have until the 30th of October to do that, pass that. If they don't get it done, it goes to the Ohio Redistricting Commission, these same 7 individuals. They have about 30 days to try to reach a thing. If they don't get it, it's back to the House. The majority minority vote split is slightly adjusted. Instead of half, it's got to be a third. But given the minority, the number in the minority, we're talking a handful of people. And if they don't get it for a 10-year map, then your default position is a 4-year map for the congressional map. And we go through this kabuki dance again in 4 years. The good news is we will have had 4 years to pray over the census data, so we won't have that excuse. So anyway, how did we get to the current situation? back in history of less than 10 years ago, the League of Women Voters said, we have got to do something about redistricting. And they started a campaign, a petition for a constitutional amendment of the state constitution. And they were very close to getting that petition sufficient signatures and calling that constitutional amendment. And then the State House, controlled as it is, steps forward. Whoa! They jumped in front of the train and said, we have a plan to do it. And they came out with a constitutional amendment. And that's the one that's adopted. It was adopted in all 88 counties. It was adopted by better than 70% of the vote. Nothing is carried to that extent. So everybody wants fair districts. And we're on the process on how to do it. And I hope that we do it because our future depends on it. Over to you.
Thank you for that. So, a couple of things come to my mind that I want to, and Representative Hicks Hudson, number one, one I'll makes, you can piggyback off of, you can add more to what Mr. Sutton said. But when I think about, I heard him mention a constitutional amendment. And so I'm assuming this is an amendment to the state constitution. And when that occurs, we know that is extremely hard because it has to be a ballot initiative. It's extremely hard to, amend it. And that's why a lot of times people don't want to put things into the state constitution because it's almost like it's memorialized or concretized there. And it's just difficult to shift. And so if that's part of the issue, understanding how difficult it is to get something amended through the state constitution, how do we really get to this to this fairness that everyone is speaking about, or that we desire, because we know that a lot of things are moving so oddly these days. I guess I want to put it, it's moving so oddly, and it's moving in a way that the speed of politics is much faster than what people can keep up with. And we're just seeing so many things coming across the wind and just getting slapped in the face with that newspaper and like, whoa, when did this happen? So when do we actually get to that point of fair, or how do we get to that point of fair?
Well,
I'll speak
think
for the. Go
I
ahead.
think if I can say this, let me just back up, because first of all, you when you put something in the Constitution, you want it to be difficult to change out of, and you want it to be at a high level of how government operates. So the whole idea about the redistricting commission and that process, and I agree with Mr. Sutton about that the legislature jumped in front, because I think what the people wanted was something even more radical than what we have. If we go back to the last redistricting process, there was this talk about the bunker, where the representatives and the legislature got in and they did some horse trading and came up with these maps that are horrendous. I mean, not the maps, but it was a map, and the districts were horrendous. And how, and primarily with the congressional maps that were such bad ones, the snake on the lake and the duck or whatever. But more importantly, the lack of people being represented by their elected official. So my response to that is that we don't want the whims and the waves of public opinion to affect how government, the bedrock, the structure of government, how it works. But that being said, that I think that there is a movement afoot. The people that came out to the various commission information meetings were tremendous numbers, and people all spoke about wanting representative government. So I think that's very important, and from that, I think other things can happen, because when you have people having, I picked up the phone and I was able to get something done. I got this traffic light taken care of around the corner because I called my elected official. That's how, I think we can get back to government and being responsive to the people. But what does it take? It takes constant vigilance. It takes people like us talking and not being afraid to have these conversations. A lot of folks don't want to talk because they think that when we talk about elections, we're talking about politics. We're talking about partisan politics. No, we're not. We're talking about good government. And good governance or good government requires responsiveness to the citizens and explaining to them the relationship. So many people think that I go to Washington because I'm a representative, and I have to explain to them, no, I'm not Marcy Captor. She's your congressional representative. So it's a requirement that we educate folks. Um, um, there's a class in Toledo that the teacher is having her students draw maps. And so I'm hoping that the maps that they draw now, they probably are not going to be, I'm not sure what they're going to look like, but whether they're statewide or local, but they're drawing maps. And so I suggested once they finish, they submit them through the portal at the redistricting, I can't say that word right now, the commission, so that the commission will have them to review. Whether they review them or not, they will be part of the record. And I think that's the most important thing, is to create the record, and that voters cannot, Ohioans cannot get weary in well doing, because this is a long process. We just didn't get here overnight. We didn't get here just 10 years ago. This has been something that has been working up to it. And now we see the strange fruit of those things that happened 10, 15, 20 years ago. Because it's all, in my opinion, an assault on citizens being able to have an impact on government. And when we talk about, you brought the question up about voter suppression. Voter suppression in Ohio is very insidious. It's not necessarily moving precincts or closing down, saying you're going to be one place. But what it is making it so that you have fewer machines in certain districts, certain polling locations, or you have more polling locations. You have fewer polling locations in certain kinds of areas and equipment, so that people who have to get back to work may have they don't have a lot of time to vote. Changing dates and times for voting. One time, this whole thing about early voting and whether or not you can have weekend voting or Monday voting or whatever. All those are tactics to confuse the voter. That's voter suppression. And so I feel as a candidate, my job is not only to get people to vote for me, but to get people to vote. And in order to do that, you got to go where they are. You got to explain to them the benefits of voting and what their vote means. One of the things that all politicians hate, I didn't say public servants, I said politicians, they hate to hear, you work for me, I voted for you, or I'm a citizen, I live in your district, and I have whatever, expect, want, you should listen to me. And to me, that is music to my ears. That's what I'm supposed to do, listen. I may not agree with what you're saying, but I need to listen and give you the respect that is necessary as a constituent, or even not a constituent, but as an Ohioan. So I think redistricting is the current issue that we have to hit straight up and move forward with it, and with all of our being, educate people, and don't let folks think, well, my voice doesn't count. Yes, it does. Your voice absolutely counts. Looking at these maps, getting on the commission website, and even if you don't understand everything, I'll say this real fast. A story. It's what happened in Toledo at the library. The library here, they allow folks that are homeless to stay as long as they're not disruptive. There was a gentleman that was standing in the door. I saw him ask one of the librarians what was going on. She told him. He got a slip. He filled it out. His name was called. He came up and he said two things. I think I want fair maps. No, he said three things. I want fair maps, and I'm homeless, and it is hard being homeless. He repeated that 2 more times. I want fair maps. I'm homeless. It's hard being homeless. If that gentleman who is homeless understood what a fair map is and what is necessary, and then the connection is that the public library relies upon voters for levies in order to be able to operate and to have a place where this man during 98, almost 100-degree weather was safe during the day, then that's why voting redistricting is important. And I'm going to kick it over for Mr. Sutton so he can, give his comments that I interrupted.
Well, let me say, first of all, thank you. That's a very powerful
Yes.
story, because we don't look at the lived experiences. We tend to reiterate the words, and we understand some of the problems attached to these things. But what you just did was you humanized it in such a way that I think it's a blow, and that we do need to identify it additional ways, even, to humanize what it is, and the fact that this is not about a politic or anything like that. This is really about people having a quality
Yes.
of life, having access, having the ability to just have just your basic fundamentals of being able to have a roof over your head, food on your table, take care of your children go to good schools,
Yeah.
and a job with a living wage, in healthcare, and yeah, so thank you for sharing that. Mr. Sutton, if you'd like to take a minute or so and kind of piggyback, I have a question for you after Jerry, Dr. Barry.
Okay. First of all, I believe that we need to get everybody registered to vote. But, that's the first thing. But to make the system work, we need to get volunteers to work the polls. If you want to learn the system, go to your board of elections, say, I'm willing to work in the polls. It is a great education of your fellow human beings and how the system works. Also, gerrymandering, we threw that around, and we talked about it at the state level and the national level. Look at your own precinct and how it's drawn. There are very few of those that are necessarily compact and contiguous either. I can think of the precinct maps in Greene County here. There's some every bit as egregious as you mentioned the snake in the lake. So focus on your local district, your local activities. That's where your vote's going to count. The school board member is nonpartisan, but that happens. Village council, got to happen. Local officials, make them accountable and vote and interact with them. And then, you will be informed at the other thing. The problem is everybody hears because TV is blasting all the time. So they vote in the presidential race, but they don't go down ballot. They don't know who the judges are or what they've done. They don't know their county officials or their state officials. You need to be an informed voter, and working at the polls will help that. So over to you guys.
Thank you for that. And I know it's been restated a couple times about, the judges and, different levels of offices that are open that people would serve in, represent the community. And I think, it is critical because we don't think about, one question I have is like, how does redistricting even impact the judges that we vote in? How does that impact people or the communities? The other party is looking at the fact that people don't realize we vote for the coroner. You have all of these different positions or people or offices that you vote for, but we don't have the education. We have so it's like breaking down some indoctrinations. And what I hear you say, Jerry, is don't vote name only, because a lot of times people vote by familiarity, or just go straight down the line. because that's been the easiest thing to do. And so so Peggy, one question that I have, and then we'll go to the representative. I believe she was getting ready to come off of her mic. Is I understand the League of Women Voters. You have a website, and there are things. There's a wealth of resources that people can get. My question is there things that people, how are there ways that the League of Women Voters is reaching out to the community? Are there meetings that people can come to? And then the other part of this is, I guess I look at the fact that even though there are poll workers that's needed, I think of the fear mongering that's going on and the safety. People can't even go to the park, and you don't. And I know somebody who went to the park and they got ambushed and got shot up. So it's also this thing of, yes, the League of Women Voters, we do this, but I think it's also crossing these bridges between not just the training on the issues. I'd like to know what trainings do you offer, and are they available to the community? But I guess also it's like, how do we cross this bridge, especially when it comes to the women's vote? And I'll ask both you and the representative to answer this question, because we know the woman's vote is important. We saw it during the election. It was, the fight between stifling or suppressing the Black woman's vote or voice, as well as, Black people, but then also vying and trying to create this conversation or this fear mongering for the white woman's vote who lives in a specific community, and it's prefaced upon safety. So we know that the woman's voice is viably important. And we also know that it's going to take all of us, not just some of us. So what are some of the ways that the league is also, kind of breaking down those boundaries to help, bring the all of us together rather than just the some of us? But then, Representative, I'd like you to even speak to the need and the necessity for the Black woman's voice and vote. And what do we, how do we just bring this together for even deeper fairness? Because women are being attacked on many levels, and used on many levels, politically, as well as for the vote.
Do you want me to start, or Representative Hicks Hudson to start? Either way, huh? Okay. So the League of Women Voters does outreach into community organizations. We have partnered with ACLU and NAACP. We have like Vote 411 or Common Ground. We are out in the community. Just this past Saturday, and this is so important. This past Saturday, there were a group of about 6 different nonprofits that were at the Dayton Public Library downtown. And I was there and I visited every booth. But then I went into the downtown Dayton Library, which had an excellent display on redlining. I don't think many folk know about the redlining that the African Americans experienced in the United States. And I'm sorry, my hair's like tingling because it was so good. So we do reach out into the community. We have a speakers bureau. We will do, thanks to COVID, we do Zooms on education. We actually tried to have a get together in person this past week, and we canceled because of the Delta variant. But we do a lot of outreach. And I was listening to all of you discuss how a lot of times some of that docket, you don't even have competition. And that's so important. Running for office is so important. And trying to get women into those offices so that there's a woman's vote. And I'm talking someone who is strong in their values and their convictions, because it's not going in there as a woman and a man telling her what she is supposed to do and say. It is how she feels in her soul on how she should vote. And I truly, we talk about home and health and me, I'm into clean air and clean water, and our representatives don't listen. And I have been shouting from the rooftops for a long time on that. So uh, you have to, as a woman, speak your values, hold your values. Don't let your husband or boyfriend tell you how to vote, or your pastor tell you how to vote. You vote your convictions, and you understand the issues. And like I said, the League of Women Voters will help you with those issues and will do a voter's guide. And they're free, and they will be online, or they're in the libraries. You can pick one up down at the Dayton League. They will be there before the election. And I'm not sure when they're available. I think they will be available end of September, first week of October. I wish I could say definitively when they will be available, but they will be available. And we look at all of our representatives within that specific area. So now I'm preaching to the choir, I'm sure. I'll let Representative Hicks Hudson talk.
Thank you so much. I was going to say that that's one of the great things about the League of Women Voters, although men are part of the organization now, is that it grew out of the need of the women's suffrage movement of women, once they got the right to vote, to make sure that women did vote as independently as they could then from their husbands or that male dominant figure back then and there. But the woman's voice, Black woman's voice, is so important, because we as a society, we're made up of just not whites or Blacks or men or women. But when one group, or brown or yellow, what have you, when one group's voice is not heard, then society is not balanced. And I think what we're seeing today is that all these unbalances are now coming to the forefront. And I think about some of my the women in particular that I can name that have helped me to get to this point, to even think about it. The reason I'm an elected official is because of a local woman here in Toledo who called me when I was working in Columbus and talked to me about the need for someone with my skills to be on city council, because I had no plans to ever run for elected office. But when that woman's voice is heard and that perspective is brought to the table, it can, and I have seen it, create a better solution, a more just solution, a more viable solution that everyone can buy into, because all voices are being heard. If we think historically about this country, that the only people who originally could vote were men, white men who owned property. That was the first voter. We've come to today where anyone that is a U.S. citizen over the age of 18 is able to vote, unless they are incarcerated and under some type of disability. But in general, we have the ability for people to vote. So how do we get them there? And I think we have to tell them why it's important, what's in it for them. School is important. This whole question about the pandemic and folks can't find work, and everybody's blaming people for not returning back to low paid, probably unsafe, not one of the best work environment types of jobs. And folks are saying, well, they're staying at home. They may be staying at home, but that's because they need childcare, or that the jobs that they're looking at they need health insurance because they're afraid of health issues. So how do we translate all those things? We translate that by talking to people and saying, if you vote, then you have a say in how we increase the minimum wage to a living wage, how we can expand healthcare, how we can really truly have universal pre-K. I don't want to sound like a politician in here, but I've got a plan for how we as the state of Ohio can jump into the forefront and help get our babies educated so that they start to school ready to learn and even advanced. But those are issues that many of the male colleagues don't think about. Within our caucus and within our house, the women are the ones leading issues about maternal health. The men have jumped on board lately, but for the last, I've been in the house for 3 years, and it was the women who brought issues of childcare, of third grade reading, and all these things that may unfortunately be considered soft, but they're vitally important. And those are things that I think are important. And I agree with Dr. Barry when she says that women have to use this opportunity to speak their minds and not be influenced unnecessarily because of a male counterpart. And it's, I love men, and I think men bring a great deal to the table, but oftentimes women's voices are not taken seriously, or they are ignored. And so more women that are in the house, the more that we'll hear and the more things we'll be able to accomplish. There is such a need for all voices to be heard. And I believe that women, Black women, brown women, yellow women, green women, those voices are very important, and we have to make sure that they are heard, and we do that through the vote.
Thank
And,
you.
and it's all women,
Yep.
all women. I mean, yeah, we need to be there. We need to stand together, and we need to hold our hands across Ohio and make the change necessary so that our children and our children's children, they will be they will be calling us blessed for doing it for them.
Absolutely.
Sorry, like I said, I was getting real, fired up with all of this, and I still am. Voting is so important. So important.
Absolutely. There was I'm going to give another story of a lady who, I think she was from Western Ohio, and she was talking about, she had some comment about that, talking about charter schools, or that the budget was diverting money, education dollars, to charter schools or community schools, whatever they're called. And that one of the things that in the urban areas, those types of places, kids are going to be graduating with advanced college credits, whereas her sons are in public school in a rural community, and they don't have access to college courses. We have the technology today that while those kids are in Pioneer, Ohio, with broadband and opportunities, that they could be taking courses at universities, Toledo, Findlay, Bowling Green, whatever, community colleges. But it was a woman. Okay, I'm getting sexist again. I'm sorry, Mr. Sutton, but this woman brought something up that was very enlightening to me, because much of this education discussion has been about public education, charter schools, and not really, in my opinion, dealing with the lack of resources for rural schools. And these kids should have the same type of educational opportunities that everyone has, regardless of where they are. And the pandemic, a good thing of the pandemic, we do have ways to do that, and that's something, is why redistricting is so important, why voting is so important. why citizens have to be engaged and not just pull the lever on election day and go home and then complain over their beer about what's happening in Columbus or down at City Hall or in Washington. Um, you know, they should be contacting us, the elected officials, and saying, we like what you did. We don't like what you did. Here's a suggestion. Here's a thought. What about this? It's democracy is a participatory encounter. You just can't sit and twiddle your thumbs.
Exactly. Thank you for that. Listening to everyone, I can say that I have been educated even more so, because a lot of times, we just kind of look at what's before us and not everything that's around us. And even though we speak to all of these issues at hand, we really, it's like broadening and deepening our understanding of how the various things impact us, from the census to redistricting, to, participatory democracy, shifting the paradigm, our vote really does matter, and moving and not looking at it from just the point of the presidential election, but looking at where people power really does have a say, and understanding how the connections and the threads from the local to the state to the federal government, and really where, we have, for lack of a better way of putting it, your mother used to say, skin in the game. We have to understand that, because we continue to push, but not realizing or holding public officials or this commission, especially in the redistricting, accountable. And so we do have to continue to stand strong. And as you said, Dr. Barry, stand hand in hand, because it is the mothers who's going to, fight for certain things, because we understand that nurturing aspect of it. And then, the men are going to fight for other things, just because of, unfortunately, just the way that roles play, play out in our lives. So I want to, thank everyone for joining us tonight. It was a wonderful conversation, and it's always never enough time, because there's so much to talk about, so much to be done, but what I can appreciate about this is that, getting things done means you have to start. I tell people all the time, you just can't, sit in the car and really just, talk it away. You've got to open the door to the car and get out, and let's just kind of like begin to join together to move it away. And so I encourage, all of our listeners, yet again, to get involved in the conversations around redistricting. If there is a training in your area, please, by all means, go to that training, go to the websites that was shared in the chat. If there's questions, I heard Representative Hicks Hudson say, call them. Sojourner Truth I remember her, and this was, she was praying. She talked about a prayer, and she said, I told God I was going to be up in your face until you answered me. We just have to be up in somebody's face until they answer us, because, we can wear them out. Because it's critical. I said it the last time, and I think this is a question we must ask ourselves all the time. What is the inheritance that we want to leave our children and our children's children? What is that inheritance on every facet of our lives? Because participatory democracy, in my opinion, becomes people-centered democracy. It moves beyond the issues and down to the people. And you all have done such a wonderful job of explaining that and sharing that. I encourage you to go to the League of Women Voters website, look up the information that they have on their website. By all means, take advantage of what they have. If you are interested in partnering and doing the training, if you're an organization or whatnot, there's no reason why we aren't educated, because there are resources and people out here who can help to educate us. Nonprofits get grants to do these things. So let's just, it would be nice to be able to have a resource base. I'm probably thinking down the line, but there's so many ways that I think if you just make that one phone call can be a thread to other phone calls. and start, doing some public education events with your representatives. Call and do public education events. It's not about being partisan. It's not about being political. It is really about educating. And the representative didn't say this, but third grade reading scores is critical, because that's when they determine how many prison beds they need for the future.
Right.
And so they're looking at our children. And so we have to look at how they think far, and we have to think even further. So again, there's some links that have been shared in the chat, in the public chat. There are some things that Dr. Barry mentioned, that you can go to the League of Women Voters and you can go to their website and do some, just research the website. Representative Hicks Hudson let you know to keep calling, keep pressing, keep on pushing, don't give up, because your voice does matter. And lastly, everybody has said in order for a change to happen, we first have to be that change and join that change. So I thank you all for being a part of that change today, helping and encouraging others to be instruments of change. I'd like to give 1 minute if anybody, I know Dr. Barry, when you and I spoke, you had an announcement, and I wanted to just give you a minute to make that announcement. And Representative, if you have an announcement, I'd give everybody a minute, and then we'll close on out, if you have any announcements or last words.
Okay, I'm going to let you know that as you saw, I get really excited when I talk about the fact that we need clean air, clean water, tillable soil. We have issues in our aquifer. We have to do a whole bunch of money with trying to clean that aquifer water up, or the Great Lakes. When toxic algae came and they shut down the intakes in Toledo, that was a mess. And then we have PFOS going down the Ohio River. So I want to let you know that I am speaking for the Environmental Justice Series through the Sierra Club, their equity group, on September 16th at 12:30. If you follow me on Facebook, you'll see the announcement, or in Sierra Club. And because I have such clean water is such a heart for me, I started a nonprofit called Between the Waters, and I'm just getting started with that. So you'll see more about that on social media, as well as LinkedIn and other areas. I'm developing my website now. Thank you.
Thank you. I see you're off of mute, Representative, so please go next by all means.
Thank you so much. As always, Bishop, I am honored to be a part of conversations that can help our community go forward. I was trying to remember, which I'm horrible to remembering, that the Ohio Redistricting Commission also has a website. And it's probably Ohio Redistricting Commission.gov or .org, but there's a lot of information. And also the Ohio channel has the various meetings that were held. And I think it's always important for folks to go to the source and let them know what you think about the maps, and the fact that we're 14 days away from the deadline that we need, and what are they doing? Because the fact that we don't have a series of meeting dates is problematic for all of us. And I believe that one of the speakers at the Toledo group said something that came out of the 60s: all power to the people. And we, the people, have the power, and we need to exercise it. And we exercise it by participating in this democracy. And again, thank you. And I thank my other colleagues on this broadcast for words of wisdom, words of information, and passion, because I think that's the other thing, that we need to get passionate about government and about people. So again, thank you, Bishop, for allowing me to be a part.
Thank you. Mr. Sutton.
I just reemphasize that politics is not a spectator sport. It's a participatory event, and encourage you to participate at all levels. it's, a great opportunity. This year is called an off year. We don't have a lot going on, typically local officials. So that takes a special energy to get people fired up about it. But it is a great entry point if someone wants to get in public life, as Representative Hudson has. Go to an off-year event, pick an office and run for it, whether it's dog catcher, whatever, and go do it. But do your homework and be able to articulate your positions and defend them. Other than that, thanks for the opportunity.
No, thank you. And thank you for the wealth of information that you brought and sharing the resources where people can go to. So again, I'd like to thank the audience for joining us tonight. I ask that you go to our Facebook page, Black Women Rising, and that's spelled BLAQUE Rising. Black Women Rising, I'm sorry. And please like and follow us. And there's a QR code there. If you want to know more information about the organization and the work that we do, the QR code will allow you to join our mailing list so that we can stay in touch with you. This has also been streamed via YouTube, and I would ask that you go to our YouTube page. There is a word. And please subscribe to our YouTube page and like our YouTube page. Put on the notification so that you'll know when we are speaking. Yet again, our goal right now is to get up to 100 people to subscribe. So we ask that you please subscribe and tell a friend, because again, the purpose of There Is a Word is because we do believe that there is a word for every situation in our lives. And as long as we have that word and we pass it along and we keep it truthful and transparent, we can build upon that word and begin to shift some paradigms and bring one another together. As the representative said, our words can they can bring about compassion. And our goal is to create a community where we're having words that bring more healing than harm. And so I ask again that you join, subscribe to There Is a Word, like us, leave some comments. We want to hear from you. Maybe there's a topic that you want to hear about, and by all means, let us know. And, and we'd be more than honored to discuss that topic. If you feel like, hey, I want to be on this show, put on there, I want to be on this show. I've got something to say, and someone from our organization will reach out to you. I want to give a big hands up and a heartfelt thank you to Kara Solutions, which is headed by Sue Weebly. If you really want somebody to do some great logistics and some phenomenal work for you, by all means, reach out to Kara Solutions. I'm hoping she's listening and putting her email in the chat box to support her business and what she does in helping to educate the community. And again, I want to say thank you to each and every one of our speakers. I want to say thank you to each and every one of our listeners. I want to just say thank you for just making space, not only to hear us, but to witness the truth in action. And I remind you, get educated, inspire someone else so that we can be activated to be instruments of change in our community, because we want to leave an inheritance for our children and our children's children that they will be proud of. I want to say good night to everybody. Have a blessed week and a wonderful and safe weekend. And we will see you again on September 16th, where we will have retired police officers here and a school resource officer. And we really want to talk about the importance of community and bridging that gap between community and policing, but also really kind of put that together at the polls as well, because people were kind of fearful about the police at the polls. So again, I say thank you and I wish you well and have a wonderful weekend. Bye.